You can't speak about the world without looking to India's 1.3 billion people. Like China's 1.4 billion, it represents a sea of humanity. But India is also the world's largest producer of generic medicines, and as such will be critical if a vaccine is developed. I speak to Barkha Dutt, a prolific broadcaster and writer whose reports literally from the road are a human lens to a complex crisis. Barkha, one thing that makes me really sad is seeing these numbers continue to climb in India. We can talk about numbers, but let's talk about the people behind those numbers. What are some of the human stories that have moved you?
We have about 45 million migrant workers. When the lockdown was first declared, and remember you're talking about 1.3 billion people in lockdown, there was a panic reaction among these poor people who A, wanted to be home just like any other human being, and B, they lost their source of income because there were daily wages and the factory owners, etc., stopped paying them because there was no indication of how long India was going to remain in lockdown. And so you had these men, women, children walking in the blazing heat through the darkness of the night, sometimes with little children who are crying. I have met children in the darkness of forests who I have met just weeping inconsolably because they have nothing to eat. I have met people walking hundreds of kilometers on foot. I have met a woman who delivered a baby by the roadside and then got up and then walked for another 100 kilometers just because there was no choice. So what happened with India was that we had twin challenges. We had the medical, the pandemic itself, and then we had this humanitarian crisis playing out for our poorest citizens. So for example, we were saying to people, stay at home. Now, what does stay at home mean for a poor family where 7 people are staying in a room the size of a closet? So we had to learn as a country along the way that some of our ideas lifted from the West or from the East, just copied and pasted from other experiences, did not apply to our particular realities.
The Indian Council of Medical Research confirms there are 3 vaccines there in different phases of human trials. I wonder whether India, which is this great producer of generic medicines as well, is actually the key for moving forward as a world.
It's a great question, and I know that I've interviewed certainly one of the vaccine producers, the Serum Institute, which actually is the world's largest manufacturer of vaccines. And its owner, Adar Poonawala, was telling me that he's partnered with the Oxford vaccine trial, and so if the trial is successful, then you're going to see mass production of this vaccine coming out of India. And in fact, the argument he made was exactly this. He said, why should we limit our production to India? We can supply this vaccine at much cheaper costs to the rest of the world, to the parts of the world that need it. Why should even Americans, for example, pay more for a vaccine when it can be mass produced cost effectively from India?
I'm in China, you're in India. There are more science PhDs globally coming out of these 2 countries alone than anywhere else on the planet. We've seen India and China do so much in terms of greening the planet, for example. Do you think they get overlooked somewhat, whether it be in this response to the COVID pandemic or more widely?
The problem is that in another time, I would have said that China and India should have found a way to cooperate. But 2 things have happened that will stop that. One is we've had a border standoff with China in Eastern Ladakh. In the middle of this pandemic, there was a border dispute. So because emotions are very high at this point, this is a time when that cooperation, unfortunately, I don't see happening government to government. Of course, people to people remain friends. I know doctors talk across borders. I know doctors have friends in other countries and they exchange developments all the time. And I know that there's a certain amount of curiosity in India about how Wuhan in particular got back on its feet. Are there lessons to learn and so on?
I want to finish by asking about you. I'm proud of our friendship. I look at your work all the time. I see you traveling across the country throughout this pandemic. How are you keeping safe?
How did we keep safe? Well, the science kept changing and we had to keep changing with it. So for example, when we first started, we were told that everyone doesn't have to wear masks. Now the science has completely changed on that, and masks are seen as the one effective way in crowded, closed, dense areas. But I remember when we started, doctors even would tell us, even the World Health Organization's scientists told me, leave the masks for the doctors. And so we would not wear masks. So what we did was very basic precautions. Wash your hands, sanitize when you can, and now wear masks. There's really not much more than you can do but take basic precautions, very elementary basic precautions, and you live and you work.
Your work is so important because it continues and has done for many years to shape public understanding. But I ask you, please be safe, and everybody where you are.
Thank you,
Barkha,
James,
thanks
and
a lot,
stay
Barkha.
safe too. It's a pleasure, and I'm so happy to be talking to you after such a long gap. So it should not be a long gap till the next time.
I am James Chau. You're watching The China Current. Follow us on social media @The China Current.